Tonight, we're traveling back to the golden heat of West Africa specifically, to the 14th century, when the Mali Empire was one of the richest and most powerful civilizations on Earth. Imagine dry red dust curling up from the heels of traders, the air thick with the scent of roasted peanuts and wet earth after a rare rain. You're standing at the edge of a great city called Niani, the empire's thriving capital. But don't get too comfortable, you probably wouldn't survive 10 minutes there without making a deadly mistake. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint against the sunrise as the faint hum of drums echoes across the valley. You're barefoot, your clothes rough spun and dusted in reddish sand, standing among other travelers near a wooden gate. It isn't made of steel or stone, but thick tree trunks lashed together with fiber cords, guarded by two men with polished spears. Behind them stretches Niani, capital of Mali, a city of wealth, power, and unspoken rules. You try to take it all in at once. Narrow dirt roads wind like roots between rows of clay homes, each glowing warm ochre under the rising sun. Roosters crow from rooftops, children in tunics run barefoot, and women carry baskets of millet on their heads without using their hands. The scent of spiced rice floats through the air. You hear the bleat of goats, a merchant calling out prices, and the soft murmur of prayers from a distant corner. Someone bumps into you from behind and mutters something you don't understand. A guard gestures for you to keep moving. You're new here, a stranger, and being a stranger in Niani means you're one wrong gesture away from being labeled a spy, or worse, someone without purpose. You step onto the main path, trying to act like you belong. Every person seems to move with confidence. They know where to walk, when to bow, which side of the road to stick to. You stumble into a shaded side street where an older woman in a deep indigo wrap stops to look at you. She carries herself like someone used to giving orders. "You're not from here," she says in a calm, accented voice. You nod, just passing through. She raises an eyebrow. "Then you'll need a guide, or you'll offend someone important by noon." Without waiting for your response, she beckons you forward. "Call me Miriam." As you follow her through the city, Miriam explains the lay of the land in a voice low enough that others can't hear. This isn't just any empire. You're in the heart of the wealthiest land you'll ever walk, and if you don't understand that, it'll eat you alive. She leads you past homes with arched doorways and painted walls. Some are simple clay huts. Others are two-story buildings with intricately carved wooden windows. You pass a group of musicians playing chorus, beautiful, harp-like instruments under a baobab tree, their melodies soft like falling water. "Gold dust," Miriam says, nodding at a pair of merchants pouring tiny grains into a pouch. "It's everywhere here. Even children play with it. But don't let that fool you. Power still decides everything." She pauses near a building with heavy curtains over the entrance. That's the home of a griot. Storyteller. Judge, memory keeper. Nothing is written down. They remember the stories, the laws, the insults. She glances at you. Step wrong with a griot, and your name will be remembered, in the worst way. You pass through what looks like a garden, but is actually a school. Boys sit in circles on mats, chanting Arabic verses while a teacher paces with a stick, tapping it gently for rhythm. Some of the older students are writing on wooden tablets with charcoal ink. Miriam says softly, "Education's sacred here. Not just religious, scientific, historical, astronomical. You'd do well not to assume anyone here is ignorant. You walk further into the city until you arrive at a massive plaza where trade buzzes like a beehive. Carts piled high with salt blocks and leather skins, spices in woven baskets, dyed fabrics from hundreds of miles away. There's noise, but it's not chaos. It's rhythmic, controlled, alive. A man stops in front of you. His robe is bright white, his face stern. "Are you here for trade?" he asks. Before you can answer, Miriam steps between you and the man. He's here to learn. The man studies you. Then let him learn quickly. This city teaches through mistakes. He walks away, leaving behind only the scent of musk oil and the heavy awareness that you're being watched. Probably by more than just guards. You continue walking, the sun now climbing higher, beating down on your shoulders. You pass a camel resting beside a trough. Its saddle is studded with silver coins. Miriam leads you to the edge of a small hill overlooking the city. "That," she says, pointing, "is the road to the palace. You'll go there eventually. Everyone does. Whether by invitation or summons, you shiver, even though it's already hot. Historians still argue," Miriam says, "whether Mansa Musa was the richest man who ever lived, but they all agree no one ever crossed him twice. You sit down in the shade of a baobab tree. The sound of the city drifts up to you like heat waves, cooking pots clanging. Someone laughing, a flute playing a single, sad note. You suddenly realize how far you are from home, how different this world is, and how completely unprepared you are. Drink," Miriam says, handing you a wooden cup of tamarind juice. It's sweet, sour, earthy, like the land around you. "Tomorrow," she adds with a smile, "you'll start working. You didn't think you'd just observe, did you?" Your heart skips. You glance again at the palace road, already knowing it will come for you. But tonight, you just rest beneath the ancient tree, surrounded by voices, colors, and the whispering dust of history. The next morning, the first thing you hear is the soft scrape of a broom made from stiff grass brushing the clay threshold outside your room. You slept on a woven mat rolled out on the floor of Miriam's home, beneath a mosquito net that fluttered slightly in the early breeze. The air smells of earth and millet porridge. Somewhere nearby, someone is grinding grain with a slow, steady rhythm, thud, thud, thud. Miriam doesn't wait for you to get comfortable. "Dress quickly," she says, handing you a tunic dyed in deep indigo and a strip of cloth to tie around your head. You need to learn how to walk the market before you're caught in it. You follow her into the streets just as the city stretches awake. Traders unlock stalls with rusted keys. Children chase each other between the legs of camels, and women in patterned wraps balance bundles on their heads like royalty. The sun is already warm on your skin. You can smell roasted peanuts, charcoal smoke, sweat, and something sweet, maybe honey cakes or dates. Then you step into the market square, and it's like falling into a whirlwind made of colors, scents, and movement. At the center, wooden tables display goods that shimmer in the sunlight. Gold dust stored in tiny leather pouches, slabs of pinkish-gray salt stacked like bricks, woven baskets brimming with cola nuts, mangoes, papayas. There's cloth so finely dyed it looks wet, and beads carved with tiny images you can't quite decipher. Miriam watches your expression with amusement. Still think you'd last a day here. You try to answer but get bumped by a man shouting prices. Another cuts in front of you, leading 2 donkeys that almost trample your toes. You nearly step into a basket of dried fish. Walk like you know where you're going, Miriam mutters. Even if you don't, you straighten your back and match her pace. She walks confidently, greeting people in several languages: Bambara, Arabic, something else you can't recognize. No one questions her. She's respected or feared, possibly both. Historians still argue, she says quietly, whether the Mali Empire was built more by gold or by reputation. But they all agree no one forgot the markets of Niani. She stops in front of a man sitting cross-legged behind a low table. He's an older trader with a face like carved driftwood and eyes that glint like obsidian. In front of him, there are spices red, orange, yellow, brown, each in a little cone, like miniature sand dunes. "Smell this," Miriam says, holding a pinch of something reddish gold under your nose. You sneeze hard. The old man laughs. "New?" he asks in a rough voice. Miriam nods, trying to survive the day. The man picks up a small bundle wrapped in palm leaf. Dry fish, tamarind, hot pepper. "Mix it with rice. You'll wake up sweating, but alive." Miriam buys the bundle and hands it to you. "This is your first purchase. Congratulations. You are now a market fool. Is that a real title, you ask?" She doesn't answer. She's already moving. You pass stalls selling ink and parchment, polished gourds, carved flutes, tools, and metal jewelry shaped like birds and moons. A boy offers you water from a calabash bowl. You thank him. And Miriam hisses, "Never drink without checking the source. Too late. The water tastes fine. A little gritty." You wipe your mouth and walk faster. At the edge of the market is a group of people gathered in a circle, murmuring excitedly. A man stands on a wooden platform holding up a blade long, curved, clearly not local. "That's from Cairo," Miriam whispers. "Steel that cuts silk in mid-air. Traders carry such things across 3 deserts. The man demonstrates by slicing a bolt of cloth with barely a flick of the wrist. Gasps ripple through the crowd. A young girl beside you pulls at her mother's sleeve. "Will we have money for the knife?" The mother shakes her head. "No. We will trade the goat." Miriam leads you away. Money is just one language here. Trade is another. Honor, reputation, kinship. Those are currencies too. And if you lose any of them, you're poorer than any beggar. You walk past a group of women haggling over a bracelet. No one raises their voice. The words are soft but sharp, like drum beats made of silk. One woman finally nods, hands over a handful of cowrie shells, and walks away victorious. Miriam leans toward you. If you bargain too quickly, they'll think you're hiding something. If you never budge, they'll think you're stupid. You stop at a booth where a young man sells talismans, tiny carved stones, feathers, bits of metal wrapped in cloth. He explains each one for health, for courage, for fertility, for safe passage. You point at one that looks like a piece of bone. "And this," the young man shrugs, "to keep away dreams of drowning." You buy it without thinking. "Good," Miriam says. "That's one you'll need." You look up, confused. She doesn't explain. Later. You follow her through the far corner of the market where smells shift again. Now it's smoke, sweetgrass, and something charred. A line of food stalls hisses with activity. Men roast skewers of meat. Women fry dough in oil that sizzles like rain. Miriam hands you a flat cake filled with something spicy and warm. "Don't ask what's inside," she says. "Just eat." You do. It's delicious. Also slightly alarming. You chew as you walk. Your senses saturated. You're exhausted and it's not even midday. You sit at the base of a crumbling wall to catch your breath. Children dart past, chasing each other with palm fronds. A musician begins playing a slow rhythm nearby deep drums that echo in your chest. Miriam sits beside you. You've done well. You didn't get robbed. You didn't cause an insult. You didn't buy fake amber. You nod. Feels like I survived something. She smiles faintly. You survived the market of Niani. That's more than most foreigners manage their first day. You watch the dust rise around the food stalls, glowing gold in the sun. You listen to the heartbeat of trade, buying, selling, exchanging, understanding without words. In this place, economy is performance, art, and ritual. It's not about coins, it's about instinct. You're still just a guest, but for a moment, you understand how the city breathes. You wake up sore. Your legs feel like logs and your arms ache from nothing you can quite name. The air is dry and smells faintly of sweat and warm stone. There's laughter somewhere outside, followed by the clatter of hooves and the low murmur of a drum. You blink your eyes open and remember you're still in Niani. Miriam doesn't give you much time to adjust. Up. Today, we visit the real heart of this empire, she says. Not the palace, not the market, the warehouse. You frown, still pulling your sandals on. Warehouse. She only smiles, where Mali hides its real power. Within the hour, you're walking alongside Miriam past rows of low, windowless buildings. They don't look like much, just mud brick walls with flat roofs, but you notice how heavily guarded they are. Men with curved blades and lion skin helmets stand at every corner. A few even have bows slung across their backs. What's inside, you whisper? Gold, she says, without looking at you. And salt and records. You didn't expect the third one. Inside, it's surprisingly cool. The first room you enter is stacked high with salt slabs, thick, heavy rectangles, each taller than your shin and wrapped in woven reed mats. One man counts as others load carts. Salt, Miriam murmurs, used to be worth more than gold. Try crossing the Sahara without it. Try living through a summer without it. Your body would rot from the inside. You trail behind her as she moves deeper into the storehouse, and the scent of salt gives way to something sharper, richer, metallic. You round a corner, and there it is. Gold. Not in coins, like you imagined, but in raw chunks, dust, flakes, carefully weighed and stored in leather pouches, tucked into thick baskets and clay jars sealed with wax. People think Mansa Musa was rich because of gold. Miriam says he was. But he was powerful because of how he moved it. She leads you to a low table where a man is painting something with a fine brush onto a flat wooden board. No paper here, only smooth wood, ink, and hands that never shake. These are tax records, she explains. Every caravan, every merchant, every bag of salt, each camel that walks in or out. You lean closer. The writing isn't in Latin or anything you recognize. Arabic. Perhaps the script flows like water, dots dancing around elegant curves. They keep track of everything that matters, Miriam says. And if it's not recorded, it's not real. It won't be taxed. It won't be remembered. You realize that even in a place where laws are sung and remembered by griots, trade must still be weighed, measured, and documented. Outside, you sit in a shaded corner with Miriam and a tax clerk who offers you sour goat milk and something that looks like dried mango, but turns out to be fermented plantain. You think this empire runs on gold, the clerk says. But it runs on trust. Trust that salt will be salt tomorrow, that a sack of kola nuts weighs the same in Niani as it does in Gao, that a caravan won't disappear into the dunes without consequence. You nod slowly. How do they enforce that, he chuckles. We have ledgers, and we have blades. As the day heats up, you're taken to the loading yard. There are camels, donkeys, even a few oxen being prepared for departure. Their packs are carefully weighed, sealed with ropes and wax stamps. This one's going north, Miriam says, pointing. To Takaza, salt mines. This one, she points again, south to forest kingdoms. They bring slaves, ivory, cola, gold. You watch the workers. No one moves hurriedly, but everything happens on time. There's a rhythm to it like a song you can't hear, but everyone else knows by heart. Historians still argue, Miriam muses, whether Mali's wealth made it stable, or if that wealth just gave it more ways to crumble. You pass by a trader arguing softly with a record keeper over the weight of his cargo. Neither raises a voice, but the tension hangs heavy, like thunderclouds in dry air. That man shorted us 2 sacks last season, Miriam explains. He says it was bandits. The records say otherwise. You glance at the guards nearby. What happens if he lies again? No more trade, no more permits, maybe a public flogging. Maybe he disappears. She says it casually, like reading from a grocery list. You pass by a wall covered in carved wooden plaques. Each one shows symbols, animals, tools, trees, rivers etched deeply into polished ebony. These are merchant guild marks, Miriam says. Every trader belongs to one. Each mark holds generations of honor or shame. You stop at one that shows a twisted serpent biting its own tail. And that one? She raises an eyebrow. That one hasn't been seen in 10 years. No one knows why. They say the head trader cursed his own lineage. Whether that's true or not. You don't ask. You feel the weight of it anyway. As the sun begins to dip, Miriam leads you to a small ridge that overlooks the Niger River. From here, you can see barges drifting slowly through muddy waters, laden with cargo. This, she says, is why Mali endures. Not because of kings, because of roots, salt, gold, paper, ideas, everything flows. You sit beside her, watching the horizon burn orange and gold. You hear the bray of camels, the hum of voices in the distance, and the wind whispering past stone walls and storage rooms full of numbers and memory. Do you understand now? Miriam asks. You nod. It's not just gold. It's movement. She smiles. Good. Then tomorrow. We move. You wake before dawn to the sound of distant drums, slow, deliberate, and far too serious to be anything celebratory. Miriam is already dressed when you step outside, her indigo robe dusted with red clay. The sky is still dark, but the air smells different this morning, cooler, heavy with expectation. She doesn't greet you. Wash your hands. Today, you will meet him. You don't have to ask who him is. There's only one man in the Mali Empire who commands that kind of reverence. Mansa Musa. By sunrise, you're walking through corridors of silence. You're not in the city anymore. Not really. This part of Niani feels set apart, like a heartbeat surrounded by ribs. Every few steps, you're stopped by a guard, and Miriam simply shows a carved token from beneath her sleeve. Each one nods and steps aside. Most never get this close. She murmurs. You're not here because you earned it. You're here because he wants to see you. The palace isn't like the European palaces you've seen in books. No marble, no stained glass. Instead, it's a vast compound of reddish walls, polished mud brick that gleams like ceramic in the morning light. High archways, intricately carved wooden screens, and courtyards full of white stone and silence. No shouting, no hurrying. Even the birds seem quieter. You're led into a chamber that smells of myrrh and warm fabric. The walls are painted with scenes of caravans, rivers, horses, and stars. A griot stands near the doorway, humming under his breath, tapping a rhythm on the floor with a carved stick. Do not speak until you are spoken to, Miriam whispers. The floor is covered in woven mats, so fine they feel like silk beneath your feet. Incense smokes from a clay bowl. You wait, not knowing how long it will be. Long enough for your breath to slow, your nerves to knot, and your palms to sweat through the cloth you tied that morning. Then, without warning, he enters. He's not what you expected. Mansa Musa is not draped in gold chains or shimmering robes. He wears white, a simple tunic, loose pants, leather sandals. His only adornment is a single gold armband and a narrow strip of green silk across his shoulders. But he moves like someone who never learned to fear the earth under his feet. You bow awkwardly, knees wobbling, unsure how low is low enough. He doesn't seem to notice or care. He walks to a small stool, sits, and gestures for you to kneel. Mariam steps forward. This is the traveler I spoke of, Mansa, the one who listens more than he speaks. You glance at her. That wasn't entirely true, but you're not about to argue. Mansa Musa regards you with eyes that seem to hold the weight of deserts and oceans. You expect a voice like thunder, but when he speaks, it's quiet, measured, warm, but not soft. You've seen the market. You've touched salt. You've walked among the children of my empire. He says, "Tell me, what did you see?" You hesitate. Your mouth is dry. I saw rhythm. You say, finally, everything moves, but not in chaos. Like a song everyone knows except me. He doesn't smile, but he doesn't frown either. He nods. Slowly. This empire is not built on conquest, he says. It is built on memory, on movement, and on balance. He rises, and for a moment you panic was that the whole meeting, but then he walks toward the window, beckoning you to follow. Through the arched frame, you see the city stretching out like woven fabric marketplaces. Schools, gardens, roads like threads sewn into the red earth. There are 3 kinds of rulers, he says. The ones who take, the ones who follow, and the ones who hold the bowl. You blink, the bowl, he turns to you. Imagine a servant pouring water into a bowl. If the bowl is tilted, what happens? It spills. He nods. If it's empty, useless. But if it's steady, it holds the water, shares it, feeds others. You look down at your hands. You've never thought of leadership that way. Not as power, but as patience. He walks back to his stool, sits again, and motions to the griot. The man steps forward, carrying a rolled piece of parchment wrapped in leather string. Musa points to you. This one will write. Record, witness, not with ink, but with ears. You don't fully understand what's happening. Is this a command? Mariam whispers. He wants you to stay. You turn to her. Why? She shrugs. Because sometimes history chooses the witness. Before you can speak, Mansa Musa lifts a hand, and the griot begins to sing not words you know, but phrases that seem to spiral and echo, like water finding cracks in stone. It's a story. Maybe yours, maybe his. And as you listen, you realize you're not meant to understand everything, not yet. You're meant to remember. Historians still argue. Mariam says softly behind you, whether Musa ruled by faith or fear. But no one doubts how long his shadow lasted. The audience ends as suddenly as it began. Musa nods once. The griot strikes his staff on the floor. 2 guards appear, silent as wind. You bow again, deeper this time, with a little less fear. Outside, Mariam leads you away, down the white stone paths. You met him, she says simply. You nod, still reeling, and now you have a choice. You can leave tomorrow, or you can stay. Help me. Learn. You look back at the palace. You remember the calm in Musa's voice, the weight of his gaze, the feeling of being seen not as a threat, or even a guest, but as a vessel, a bowl, maybe. You don't answer yet, but the answer is already forming. You're dreaming of camels when the voice jolts you awake. Stand, it's not Mariam. Your eyes snap open to find two guards standing over you. Their expressions are unreadable, but their presence radiates something unmistakable discipline, the kind of authority that doesn't need shouting. You scramble to your feet. One of them hands you a rolled piece of cloth, your head wrap, which had slipped off in your sleep. No one walks near the barracks uncovered, the guard says flatly. Not even guests. He doesn't say it with malice, but with expectation, like someone reciting the sun's rising time. You wrap the cloth around your head and nod. The guard glances at your sandals. Those soles won't last. You'll be walking where you ask, to learn. They escort you out of Miriam's quarters and toward the edge of the city. The sun is low, barely cresting the horizon. The streets are quiet, still yawning awake, but the barracks are already buzzing. This is not the colorful, melodic Niani you've come to know. The Imperial Guard lives in a world of angles and silence. Their compound is carved into the earth, low-slung buildings made of stone and clay, surrounded by high walls and thorn-fenced courtyards. No merchant stalls, no music, just footfalls and steel. You're led past rows of men and women stretching with spears, practicing lunges, swinging swords in perfect synchrony. Their robes are not flashy, deep blue, sometimes embroidered with symbols you don't recognize, but their movements are clean, precise, devastating. One of the guards, the one who handed you the head wrap, turns to you. Your job today is to observe. You are not a warrior, but every visitor must understand who watches this empire. You nod. The first exercise is a silent march. 30 warriors, barefoot, moving across the sand like shadows. You barely hear them. No shouts, no commands, just motion, instinct. They form patterns, lines, circles, spirals, then freeze, then change again. They train for more than battle. Your guide says they train to be invisible, to move through cities, through camps, through palaces without a sound. You watch, mesmerized. These are not mere soldiers. These are living symbols of the Empire's stability. If the Emperor is the bowl, then these are the steady hands that hold it upright. Next, they demonstrate formation techniques. You see 5 warriors take on 20 without breaking a sweat, using geometry, terrain, timing. There is a strange beauty to it, like calligraphy drawn with bodies. You ask, do they fight often? Not as often as they prepare, which is why they win. One young warrior barely older than you catches your eye. She's lean, fast, and moves like she's dancing with ghosts. Her weapon is curved, light. She flips it once, twice, before tucking it into her belt with practiced grace. Her name is Kyra, the guard says, noticing your gaze. She's one of the fastest, and one of the few who's been chosen for court duty. Court duty. He nods. The elite within the elite. They guard the Emperor directly. Sleep near him. Eat after him. If he dies, they are buried with him. You freeze. Buried, he meets your eyes. Loyalty is not just service. It is surrender. You don't ask more. Later, they bring out the lions. Yes, real lions. 2 massive beasts led by handlers with firm grips and steely eyes. The lions aren't caged, just tethered with thick cords that stretch taut as the beasts pace back and forth. The warriors form a circle around them, neither flinching nor blinking. Why lions, you whisper? The guard responds. Because if you can stand still with death breathing on you, you can stand still with a sword at your throat. The lions snarl, dust swirls. No one moves. You realize something else. The Imperial Guard doesn't just protect, they intimidate. They remind every citizen, merchant, diplomat, and visiting prince that Mali is not just a wealthy empire, but a watched one. Historians still argue, the guard says, whether the Imperial Guard was chosen for skill or for silence. But all agree they never failed Musa. You wonder what it's like to live that way, to never flinch, to always stand a step behind someone else's shadow, to train your whole life for a war that might never come. As midday approaches, the training ends, the warriors scatter, some to barracks, others to their next duties. Kyra walks past you without a word. Her gaze flicks over you for half a second, then keeps going. The guard turns to you again. Come. You walk in silence for a while before reaching a small, shaded structure with benches and clay jugs of water. You sit. The jug is cool to the touch. You drink and feel the dust slide down your throat. You've seen the market, the guard says. You've seen the gold, but if you forget the blade, the rest is just decoration. You nod. There's nothing to say. He's right. Before you leave, he presses something into your hand. A small carved bead shaped like a lion's paw. A reminder, he says, to move quietly and watch everything. You step back into the city different. The colors are the same. The noise returns. But now, beneath it all, you can feel the eyes, watching, waiting, always ready. Miriam meets you in the late afternoon with a clay jug under her arm and a serious look on her face. No training today, she says. Today. You listen. You're relieved. After the market and the Imperial Guard, your feet ache, your head hums with unfamiliar words, and your body still hasn't figured out the rhythm of this place. But then she adds, we're going to the griots, and your heart picks up pace again. You follow her through narrow back alleys where shadows stretch long and cool between mud brick homes. Children play games using bones as dice. An old man snoozes in the shade, a basket of dried okra beside him. Everyone seems to know Miriam, but no one stops her. Her steps are brisk, intentional. At last, she stops in front of a round, domed building made of packed earth and covered in white chalk symbols. The doorway is low, forcing you to stoop. Inside, it's dim and cool, with a soft scent of wood smoke and something older like dried herbs or ancient paper. Remove your shoes, she says softly, and don't interrupt. You step onto the mat-covered floor. There are no windows, only the flicker of oil lamps hanging from the walls, and seated in the center, surrounded by boys with shaved heads and curious eyes, is a man in deep purple robes. His voice hits you before his gaze does. Low, measured, like thunder that never breaks. He's not talking to anyone in particular. He's telling, and everyone listens because they must. This morning, he says, I sang the dispute between two cousins over land that their grandfathers once shared. That land now grows cotton. One claims a stone was moved, the other that it was never marked. The truth lives between memory and silence. You sit. You try to make yourself small. The griot doesn't acknowledge you. He simply begins another story. A theft. A betrayal. A marriage promise broken. The rhythm of his voice rises and falls like breath. The boys around him nod, murmur, echo certain lines. You lean in and whisper to Miriam, "Why aren't they writing this down?" She shakes her head. Because it must live in the mouth, not the hand. Paper burns, ink fades, but a trained tongue remembers for 100 years. The griot pauses, then looks at you. Not around you, not near you, at you. What happens? He asks. When a man forgets a debt, you fumble. He's reminded. The boys chuckle. The griot smiles faintly. No. He becomes dangerous, because forgetting is a kind of lie. You nod, unsure if you're meant to speak again. He turns away. but his words stay behind like smoke clinging to cloth. Later, Miriam explains, griots are more than storytellers. They're record keepers, mediators, witnesses. Every birth, every death, every quarrel worth remembering, they carry it. How do they remember it all, you ask? They're trained from the time they can speak. Their fathers were griots. Their mothers, too. Some say they dream in songs. You walk through another chamber where young boys sit facing the walls, reciting to themselves over and over. Not reading, just repeating. One boy rocks back and forth, eyes closed, murmuring names, hundreds of them. You can hear the rhythm in his voice, like a drum hiding under syllables. He's reciting lineages, Miriam says, back 20 generations, name by name. If he makes one mistake, they start him over. You glance at her, isn't that harsh? It's the only way the memory stays clean. You pass another student who is learning judgments spoken like poetry. Not just what was decided, but how the words were said, the phrasing, the tone. You realize something: the law here isn't just content, it's performance. If a griot speaks a judgment with the wrong rhythm, Miriam says, it's invalid. The shape of the words matters as much as the meaning. Why? She shrugs. Because rhythm is what makes it live in the body. You return to the main chamber as the elder griot tells one final tale: two brothers accused of stealing a cow from a blind widow. No one saw the theft. But the griot recalls a quarrel between the brothers from a harvest festival 10 years ago. He recalls their father once borrowed from the same woman. The crowd murmurs. The judgment is clear, not because someone confessed, but because memory traced a pattern. The griot finishes, then looks to the boys. If you forget the story, you forget the warning. They nod in unison. Then he turns again to you. You are not one of us, he says. But you are listening. That means you must remember. You nod, this time, without hesitation. He gestures to a small gourd filled with water. Drink, he says. So the stories settle in your bones. You drink. The water is cool and faintly bitter. Miriam smiles. Now you're part of the archive. As you step back into the night air, the stars are just beginning to emerge. The city hums quietly. But you carry a different kind of noise now, layers of names and judgments and debts woven into your thoughts like threads in cloth. Historians still argue, Miriam says, whether the griots exaggerated, but they all agree when the empires fell. It was the griots who remembered where the bones were buried. You glance back at the domed building. It looks small now, but you know it holds centuries inside. That night, as you lie awake, you whisper a name under your breath, just one, and you promise yourself to never forget it. The scent of spiced smoke reaches you before you open your eyes. It clings to the air like a song you almost remember, thick with roasted grain, meat fat, and something citrusy and sharp. When you emerge from Miriam's home, the sun is halfway up the sky, and she's already speaking to someone in a tone that sounds more negotiation than conversation. The man she's speaking to stands tall, his robe made of striped fabric dyed in deep red and copper tones. He has silver rings on 3 fingers and a leather-bound ledger tucked under one arm. He looks like someone who always knows the price of everything, including people. This is Umar, Miriam says. He's a merchant, a successful one. Today, you're his shadow. Umar glances at you and grins. Can you keep quiet for an hour? You nod. Though you're not sure you'll be able to. Good, he says. I'm not hiring a parrot. You follow him through the winding alleys of Niani. Unlike Miriam's paths of secrets and shadows, Umar walks routes of transaction. He's known everywhere. Children wave, shopkeepers nod, everyone greets him, not out of formality but investment. He buys a bundle of dried baobab fruit from a woman without speaking. Just a look, a nod, the clink of cowries. Why didn't you haggle, you ask? I did, he says. Last season. He visits a smithy and commissions 5 brass weights. Then he pays a boy to deliver a note to someone you don't see. Everything is food, he explains, or leads to food. Tools for trade, trade for goods, goods for favor, favor for food. It's midday when he leads you into a wide courtyard tucked between high adobe walls. Shadecloth stretches overhead, casting soft shadows like ripples across the ground. At the center is a low table surrounded by woven mats. Umar gestures for you to sit. You're going to eat like a merchant, he says. But you're going to earn it. A girl no older than 10 brings a pitcher of water and a bowl of leaves. You watch Umar rinse his hands and pass the bowl to you. First rule, he says, clean hands, clean deals. The first dish arrives in a shallow clay platter, jollof rice stained red with tomato and spiced with something smoky and deep. Strips of dried meat are curled on top, like the edges of a dream. Then comes grilled river fish, glazed with tamarind and citrus. Then roasted yams with shea butter. Then tiny bowls of relishes ginger, pounded onion, peanut chili paste. You stare, eat, he says. Talk later. You do. The rice is both soft and fiery, every grain infused with warmth. The fish melts in your mouth, and the yam tastes like firewood and rain. The relishes spark like lightning in your blood. No one speaks while eating, only soft chewing, nodding, the occasional low mmm. When you finish, Umar leans back, pats his belly, and says, Now, let's talk profit. You blink, still tasting pepper. Tell me, he continues, why do we value salt more than gold? You think about what you've seen. The sweating porters, the sealed bags, the heavy carts bound for deserts. Because it keeps things alive, you say? He grins. Yes, and because it moves, gold hides, salt travels, and everything that travels becomes powerful. He pulls out his ledger. Inside are neat rows of symbols, names, weights, colors. Each mark, he says, represents someone I owe, or who owes me. Some debts are paid in silver, some in silence. You peer closer. What's that symbol, you ask, pointing to a small spiral next to one name? Favor, he says. She once warned me not to cross the river on market day. That storm sank 10 boats. I never forget a warning. You nod. So trade isn't just goods, it's memory too. He looks impressed. You're learning faster than I expected? He leans forward. Tell me something. If you had only one meal left in this world, what would you eat? You pause. Probably something warm, with spice, something that tastes like home. He nods. Exactly. And if you can sell that feeling, not just the food, you'll never starve. Later, as you walk back through the city, Umar stops beside a group of apprentices, stirring a massive pot in a street-side kitchen. Every trader must know how to cook, he says. Not because we'll do it, but because someone might ask us to. Hospitality is its own kind of currency. He tosses one of the boys a fig and receives a smile in return. No words, just trust. You return to Miriam's with a belly full and a mind spinning. Good day, she asks. He said, everything is food, you reply, even memory. She nods. Exactly. Now you're thinking like Mali. That night, you dream of spices and rivers, of rice grains singing songs, of ledgers inked in the flavor of promises. Historians still argue, Miriam whispers before you drift off. whether our dishes came from trade or from tradition, but they all agree Mealy fed more than just the stomach. You wake in the blue hush before sunrise, your muscles still aching from yesterday's walk through the market. Outside, the sky is not yet gold, but already the city breathes a goat bleats somewhere in the distance, and the faint clang of metal on stone marks the beginning of another long, dry day. Miriam is waiting. She doesn't speak. She just hands you a bundle cloth for wrapping your feet, a gourd of water, and a strip of dried baobab fruit. Then she nods toward the east. You're headed to the salt yard. Your heart sinks a little. You'd hoped for another quiet day of observation, maybe a visit to the scribes or a griot's apprentice. But Miriam's face tells you today is for sweat. You walk alone at first, passing sleeping courtyards and shuttered stalls. Then you begin to hear the voices low, steady, rhythmic. Not chants, exactly, but work songs. You round a corner and see them. Dozens of men and women, wrapped in loose tunics and dust-colored scarves, gather near an open lot where salt blocks are stacked like small tombstones. Each block is wrapped in reed matting, marked with faded symbols, and weighs more than it looks. The yard smells of heat and mineral tang. Even before the sun rises, a man with thick arms and a rope belt steps forward. "You're the one from Miriam," he asks. You nod. He hands you a strip of cloth soaked in something bitter-smelling. "Tie that around your mouth. You'll need it." The foreman introduces himself as Ba. His face is weathered and lined from years of sun and salt, but his eyes are sharp. You won't carry the big loads. Not yet. Just learn the rhythm. The desert doesn't wait for those who can't find pace. He shows you how to balance a half block of salt wrapped in leather, cinched with rope onto your back. It pulls at your shoulders instantly. Your knees dip. "Straighten up," Ba says. "Bend at the waist, and you'll crush your lungs before midday." You mimic his stance and join the line. The work begins. Each porter moves with a measured step heel, toe, heel, toe feet, digging into packed earth. The line stretches out of the yard, across the city, and toward the northern gates. You don't go that far today, just a practice loop around the yard. Still, within minutes, your shirt clings to your back, and your breathing turns ragged. Salt rubs through the cloth. It scratches. It stings. You carry, drop, walk back, load again. Time doesn't pass normally. There's no clock, only the shifting of the shadows and the way your legs begin to tremble after the 5th round. You lose count. You lose the names of things. There is only the weight, and the dust, and the chant. A young porter beside you murmurs between breaths. "You thought this was the Gold Empire, didn't you?" You manage a nod. He grins. Everyone does. But gold sits. Salt moves. Salt earns. You don't speak. You can't. But watches everything. When someone staggers, he's there with water. When someone stumbles, he gives a sharp word, not cruel, just exact. No one complains. "This," he says during a short break, "is how Mali breathes. Through legs, through backs, through sunburns. You sit against a shaded wall and drink from your gourd. The water is warm, a little gritty, but it feels like salvation." Ba crouches beside you. You think this work is hard. You nod, still panting. "This isn't the worst part," he says. "The worst part is the silence." You frown. He taps the salt block beside you. Out there in the desert, there's nothing. No trees, no birds, just wind, and the sound of your own body breaking. You shiver, though you're drenched in sweat. "You'll go tomorrow," he says. "Just a day's march, no farther. You want to protest, but you know better. You've seen how things work here. You watch, you walk, you carry. By the time the sun begins its slow descent, Your legs feel detached from your body. Every muscle pulses with exhaustion. The other porters still move with grim grace. But you're dragging your feet. Last run, Ba says. You lift the load with shaking arms. Your skin is raw beneath the cloth, your fingers numb. And then it happens. You trip. The block of salt hits the ground with a dull thud, cracking slightly at the corner. You brace for laughter or scorn, but none comes. Just silence. Heavy and immediate. Ba approaches. You expect him to yell. He doesn't. He kneels beside you and picks up a handful of salt dust from the cracked edge. He lets it trickle through his fingers. This dust, he says, was once ocean. Before time, before kings. It's old enough to remember when this land was water. You sit up slowly. He looks at you. Carry it with care, because it remembers more than we do. You nod. You lift the block again carefully this time. You finish the run. At the end of the day, the porters gather in a circle. Someone plays a simple tune on a wooden flute. Ba offers you a piece of roasted millet bread, and it tastes like the earth itself burnt. Bitter, grounding. You carried well, he says. Not strong yet, but stubborn. You smile weakly. Is that enough? He shrugs. It's what keeps you alive. That night, Mariam applies a balm to your raw shoulders. It stings, then soothes. You walked with them, she says. Now you know what it costs to move the empire forward. You lie on your mat, bones aching, mind still vibrating with the rhythm of footfalls and breath. Historians still argue, Mariam adds, whether salt made Mali rich or just held it together. But every road they trace begins with a porter. You close your eyes, and for the first time, dream not of gold or kings, but of weight, and dust, and quiet strength. The next morning, your body protests every motion. Your shoulders scream. Your thighs feel carved from stone. Even your fingers ache. You lie on your mat longer than usual, hoping Mariam might allow a slower start today. No such luck. She enters carrying a worn satchel and a long walking stick. Up, she says. You're leaving the city. You blink at her, disbelieving. Now she drops the satchel by your feet. You need to understand the land that feeds the stories. The salt is one part. The silence is another. The word silence tugs at something in your memory, Ba's warning from the day before. You gather your things and follow Mariam out of Niani's eastern gate. As you walk, the city fades behind you, its color, its rhythm, its warmth. The dust rises higher now, less red, more pale. The trees thin, the songs fade. You hear only your breathing and the crunch of earth beneath your feet. The world shifts. The road becomes suggestion. The sky opens wide. Even the wind feels different thin, as if stretched too far. The desert doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in, grain by grain. Mariam walks with steady purpose, her stick tapping in rhythm. After a long silence, she speaks. Do you know how the dunes learned to move? You glance at her. Wind. She shakes her head. Jealousy. You wait. A long time ago. She begins. The mountains mocked the flat land, called it weak, called it blank. So the land whispered to the wind and said, "Move me!" The wind agreed. Now the mountains are still and the dunes dance. You smile. That's not how science explains it. She grins. And yet the dunes still move, don't they? You say nothing. The desert around you feels less empty now, less still. You reach a ring of stones set in a wide circle, each one carved with symbols. Stars, fish, birds, a woman holding fire. What is this, you ask? A listening place, she says. The elders would gather here on nights when the moon hung low. They'd tell the stories not meant for daylight. She leads you to the center and sits. You sit opposite. Close your eyes, she says. You do. And she begins to speak. There was once a boy who wandered too far from his village and was found by a spirit with 7 mouths. Each mouth spoke a different truth, one sweet, one cruel, one bitter, one hollow, one loud, one soft, and one silent. The spirit said, "Choose which one you will believe." The boy listened carefully, and finally chose the silent mouth. You open your eyes. Why? Because only the silent mouth waited. She tosses a small pouch of dates between you. You chew slowly, tasting salt in the sweet. Another story begins, this one about a woman who lived with crocodiles in exchange for their secrets. Another about a tree that wept honey during eclipses. Another about a man who forgot his own name and wandered so long he became a wind himself. Some tales are funny, some ache, others disturb in a way you can't explain. You ask, do people still believe these Miriam's eyes don't waver? That's the wrong question. The right one is, do they still matter? You fall quiet. She continues. A good story keeps water in the skin. A better one keeps your soul in your body. But the best stories, those keep your children alive. You're unsure if she's being poetic or literal. Maybe both. Later, you both walk to a dry riverbed where the wind whistles through jagged rock. Miriam traces shapes in the dust with her stick. A fish, a crescent, a spiral. Some say spirits live in these shapes. She says, you see them best when your belly's empty and your eyes are tired. You laugh nervously. You don't believe she asks. You hesitate. I don't know. Good. She says. Only liars are certain. That night, you make camp under a canopy of stars so bright they seem too close. The fire Miriam builds is small but warm, and she tosses herbs into it that crackle and hiss. The smoke curls in strange patterns. You lie on your side, head on your rolled-up tunic, eyes locked on the stars. Miriam hums a tune with no words. The same tune the griots sang. The same rhythm the porters walked. The same meter that shaped the marketplace. It's all connected. Somehow. Historians still argue. Miriam says, half asleep. Whether these stories were myths or memories, but they all agree where the desert speaks. It never says the same thing twice. You listen to the wind. It almost sounds like whispering. That night, your dreams are full of faces with too many mouths and rivers that flow backward. You see salt turning to gold and gold turning to song. You wake with dry lips and a full mind. The fire has burned to embers. Miriam is already awake, staring toward the horizon where the dunes shimmer like breath. You listened, she says. You nod. And somehow, you feel heavier and lighter at the same time. You return to Niani just before midday. The dust clings to your legs like memory, and the city feels louder now, brighter, almost too alive after the stillness of the desert. Miriam walks beside you without speaking. She doesn't need to. Something in you is different. You carry it like a second skin. As you pass through the eastern gate, the mood in the city shifts. The usual rhythm of drums, chatter, and bartering is strained. People move quickly but speak little. Vendors close their stalls early. Children are ushered indoors. Something's wrong, you say. Miriam nods. A guest disrespected the court. You pause mid-step. How no one's told me yet, she says. But it must have been public, loud, for the market to go quiet like this. She pulls you gently by the elbow. Come, It's better to watch than to ask. She leads you through the winding streets toward a courtyard near the palace grounds, one you haven't visited before. It's carved from white stone, open to the sky, with rows of carved wooden columns lining the perimeter. People are already gathered, officials in embroidered robes, traders with tense faces, warriors standing guard at every corner. You slip into the crowd. No one stops you. Everyone's attention is fixed on the center of the court. There, kneeling, is a foreign man. His clothes are rich but dusty, his expression a mix of arrogance and fear. His wrists are bound with a braided cord, and his mouth, tight as a clenched fist, betrays that he still doesn't quite understand the danger he's in. Across from him sits a magistrate beneath a wide canopy. He's older, eyes half-lidded, fingers tapping a slow rhythm on his chair. Next to him stands a griot, staff in hand, humming softly under his breath. Miriam leans in and whispers. He insulted a noblewoman in the emperor's court, spoke over her, called her just a merchant's daughter. You glance at the man in the center. That's it, that's everything, she replies. The griot raises his hand, and the hum stills. Then the magistrate speaks, not loudly, but with weight. In the empire of Mali, he begins. Words are wealth, and insults are debts. The crowd is silent. Even the wind holds its breath. The magistrate gestures, and a boy steps forward with a bowl of sand. He pours it slowly between two lines etched into the courtyard floor. You watch the grains fall like time itself. This is the measure of his offense, the magistrate says. The weight of his dismissal, the cost of forgetting who we are. You expect punishment lashes, maybe banishment, but what follows is stranger. The man is instructed to place his hands in the sand. He does so reluctantly. The griot steps forward and begins to chant. His words weave a narrative not of the insult itself, but of its meaning. He speaks of ancestors silenced, of queens mistaken for servants, of traders whose knowledge built cities from nothing. The insult is no longer a sentence, it becomes a story, and the man becomes its fool. He is being made small, Miriam says, so that he may understand size again. The chant grows louder. It isn't cruel, but relentless. Every verse strips away another layer of his dignity, not through shame, but through perspective. You see it in his eyes, the realization that he didn't just insult a woman, he insulted a world. Historians still argue, Miriam murmurs, whether the griots punish or teach, but they all agree no one forgets being sung about. When the chant ends, the man is pale, not broken, but changed. The magistrate speaks once more. Leave the city. Walk the salt road to the coast. Tell every trader you meet what you learned here. He nods. They untie him, and he rises slowly. No guards escort him. None are needed. His punishment walks with him now, stitched into memory. As the crowd disperses, you remain rooted. That was justice, you ask. That was restoration? Miriam replies. He won't speak that way again. Not because we hurt him, but because we heard him and answered. You walk with her back toward the marketplace. Already the sounds are returning slowly, like a drumbeat finding its tempo again. A girl laughs. A trader calls out a price for dates. A goat bleats. Life resumes. But you're quieter than usual. The memory of the sand, the chant, the weight of words, it lingers. Later that night, Miriam prepares a small meal, spiced couscous with lentils and pickled mango. You eat in silence until she speaks. Power in Mali, she says, is not about swords or gold. It's about knowing your place and knowing how not to shrink others. You nod. You think of the man's face, how it cracked but didn't crumble. You ask, do people ever change after that? Miriam looks into her bowl. Some do, some leave, and their mouths grow quieter. Others just wait until no one is listening again. Which is worse? The second. Always the second. You finish eating and step outside. The stars blink above the rooftops like cautious eyes. The lesson today wasn't loud. It didn't involve whips or jails, but it left a mark. You understand now why people walk with such measured grace in this city? Because here, your voice is never just yours. It echoes. The morning air is thick with mist. Unusual for Niani. It settles low over the streets, making the city feel dreamlike and half-formed. Miriam hands you a small bundle of flatbread and fish wrapped in banana leaf, then ties a leather pouch around your waist. "You'll need this," she says. Coins, not cowries. You're crossing the river. You blink the sleep from your eyes. The Niger. She nods. It's more than a river. It's a spine. Without it, Molly's body wouldn't hold. You follow her past the market's edge and through a narrow road that snakes down toward the docks. You've heard the river before. Soft lapping sounds echoing through the streets in the evenings, but this is the first time you see it fully. The Niger is wide here, not wild like a mountain stream or still like a lake. It breathes slowly, patiently, mud-colored and broad. It stretches into the distance like a road made of moving earth. Boats drift along the surface, long, narrow canoes carved from single tree trunks, some with thin sails patched from old cloth, others poled slowly by barefoot men. Miriam points to a boat tied at the end of a wooden pier. Its prow is shaped like a crocodile's snout. "You'll ride with him," she says. The boatman is a wiry man with skin like polished bark and arms lean from years of rowing. He doesn't speak much, only nods when Miriam hands him a folded strip of cloth payment. Perhaps, or permission. As you step onto the boat, it rocks gently beneath your feet. You sit low, close to the waterline, and feel the river's pulse through the wood. The boatman pushes off. The current catches you, and you drift into the heart of the river. Miriam remains on the dock, growing smaller with each moment. You raise a hand, but she doesn't wave. She simply watches, like the river itself. The boatman poles in silence, using a long rod that he dips into the water with practiced rhythm. The mist begins to lift, revealing clusters of islets and patches of reeds. Birds rise from the banks in bursts, egrets, herons, flashes of wings against the dull sky. You pass fishermen in smaller boats. One casts a net shaped like a giant flower. Another slaps the water with a paddle to drive fish toward his trap. Children wave from the banks. A woman squats by the edge, scrubbing clothes on a flat stone. The boatman points to the east. "Jene," he says simply. You nod, though it's barely visible on the horizon. Big mosque, made of mud, but stronger than stone. He falls silent again. The boat drifts near a reed-choked bank. The air smells like wet leaves and fish oil. You hear laughter. A second boat appears. Smaller. Faster. Two young men steer it toward yours, one of them flashing a crooked grin. "Merchants," your boatman mutters, "or thieves." They call out in Bambara. You don't understand the words, but the tone is light too light. Your boatman says nothing, just rows faster. The smaller boat follows for a time, trailing behind like a curious dog. Then it veers off toward the far bank and disappears into a bend. You exhale. "Always something hiding in the reeds," the boatman says. He gestures to the shore. River keeps secrets. Bodies, boats, blessings. You float past a shrine made of driftwood and colored cloth. Candles, some still flickering, sit half buried in the mud. Strings of beads hang from nearby branches. "Offerings," he says, "to the river spirits, for safe crossing, or forgiveness. You glance at him. Do you believe in them? He doesn't answer, just touches the string of charms around his wrist. Farther down, you pass a group of traders unloading bundles onto the shore. They wave. You wave back. One of them calls out something about the price of cola. The boatman replies with a joke too fast for you to follow. Laughter carries across the water. Trade flows through here, he says. Gold goes north. Salt comes south. People come from everywhere. He squints toward the distant bank. Some don't come back. You're not sure if he means it as warning or ritual. He finally steers the boat toward a shallow curve where reeds part and the muddy bank flattens out. As he pulls in, the water grows thicker, less current, more drag. Your boat grinds against sand. End of the ride, he says. You step out onto damp earth. The bank squelches beneath your feet. Your sandals sink slightly. The boatman pushes off again, vanishing back into the river without a goodbye. Ahead is a small riverside post. A woman sits behind a woven screen, selling roasted fish and honey bread to travelers. A few porters rest in the shade. One sharp-eyed man carves notches into a staff, counting something only he understands. You eat quietly and watch the river. There's something mesmerizing about its flow, not just its direction, but its presence. Like the river isn't moving past you, but through you. Like it carries more than water. You remember what Miriam said without the Niger. Mali wouldn't hold. And now you understand. This is no border, no edge. It's the Empire's bloodstream. That evening, as you return by a different route overland this time, in a caravan of salt porters and market guards, you glance back at the wide brown ribbon slicing across the land. It doesn't shimmer like gold, but it shines all the same. Historians still argue. One of the guards says, overhearing your awe, whether the Niger built Mali or Mali built the Niger, but we know without it, we'd just be dust. You nod, and silently agree. The morning sun filters through strips of cloth stretched between wooden beams above your head. You wake in Djenné, a city that hums with quiet importance, older than it looks, gentler than it sounds. The buildings curve with soft corners, made not from stone or brick, but from earth itself. Sun-baked clay, smoothed and shaped by hand, glows warm ochre beneath the sky. Today, Miriam has sent you alone. She left you only a note. Ask for the tallest building that breathes. It doesn't take long. The locals all point the same direction, past small courtyards and palm-covered roofs, until finally you reach it, the great mosque of Djenné. It doesn't rise the way cathedrals do. It emerges, rising from the earth like it belongs to it, an enormous structure of mud and wood, its facade bristling with dozens of wooden beams that jut out like ribs or handholds for the sky. You stop in your tracks. It is not delicate. It is not fragile. It is not simple. It is alive. A man nearby, robed in pale linen and carrying a bucket of clay, smiles at you. First time he asks, you nod. He gestures toward the building. She's stronger than she looks, and she eats clay every year. You frown, confused. He laughs. We replaster her walls. After the rains, whole town gathers. Every crack, every crease smoothed by hand, like a child cleaned after play. You walk closer. The air grows cooler. A group of boys runs past, carrying bundles of palm fronds and humming a tune. Their laughter echoes against the massive walls. There's no marble, no stained glass, just earth. But it sings, inside. You remove your sandals and step into a wide, dim interior. Sunlight filters through high windows. The smell is clean clay, incense, and cool dust. Pillars rise like tree trunks, thick and silent. Shadows dance across the floor. A man seated near the entrance nods as you approach. He introduces himself as Sekou, one of the mosque's caretakers. "You've come far," he says. "Looking for what you hesitate." "I'm not sure yet. Maybe how it stands." He chuckles. "That's a good place to start." He leads you through the interior, each chamber still, each turn quiet. You feel your footsteps echo even though the floor is soft. "This place," Sekou says, "was built without iron or stone, but it has never fallen. Rain tries every year, still it stands." You run a hand along one of the support beams. The texture is unexpected, both rough and cool, like a living wall hardened by breath. "How, you ask?" "Because we remember," he says. You frown. He explains. "The mosque is not just structure, it's ritual. The replastering the gathering, it's memory made with hands. It's not enough to build something strong. You must also teach people how to care for it." You walk to the center where a large niche faces east. Here, the imam speaks, and here the prayers begin. But no golden altar, no jeweled cross, no carved icon awaits, just space. Some things are made powerful by presence, Sekou says, others by absence. You sit quietly for a moment, letting the stillness settle into your bones. Then he gestures for you to follow him to a narrow stairwell winding up one of the mosque's towers. The climb is steep, but not difficult. You reach the top and step into sunlight again, this time above the city. Below, Jenne stretches like a clay tapestry, rooftops glowing, alleys winding, people moving like slow threads through a loom. The mosque's wooden beams cast long shadows. From here, you see how carefully the entire city is built around this heart. Historians still argue, Sekou says beside you, whether this mosque was inspired by Arabia or born purely from the Sahel. But we know it was grown here, not imported, not imposed. He picks a flake of dried clay from the edge of the tower and lets it fall into the wind. Every year, he says, this place disappears just a little, and every year we bring it back. You watch the clay piece spiral downward, a breath of erosion, a breath of rebirth. You descend and step outside again just as a group of children approaches with baskets of fresh mud. They laugh as they smear the mosque's base with careful hands, pressing, smoothing, singing as they work. It's like feeding it, you say aloud. Sekou smiles. Yes, we feed what shelters us. You thank him and return to the marketplace, which buzzes with gentle energy. Traders share news, women carry firewood, and a blind man plucks a string instrument beneath a neem tree. You buy roasted plantains and sit under a canopy of woven grass, letting the mosque rest in your peripheral vision. You realize something. This is not just architecture. It's a memory engine. A structure that requires constant touch to survive, just like the empire. Like the Salt Road, like the griots' stories. If you leave it alone, it crumbles. But if you return to it again and again, it holds. That evening, as you board a boat to begin your journey back down the Niger, the sun dips low and bathes Jenne in gold. The mosque glows not because of light, but because of everything it has held, and will hold again. The days along the river drift by like the current itself, slow, deliberate, with no need to be anything else. You ride alongside traders carrying sacks of kola nuts, tailors heading toward distant cities, and a healer who speaks only when the moon rises. But it's the old man at the stern who captures your attention. He introduces himself simply as Idrissa, with a voice like dry paper and eyes like distant thunder. You've seen much, he says after watching you for a long while. But have you seen where the empire ends? You don't know how to answer. He seems amused by your silence. I'm headed to Timbuktu. You finally say. He nods. A city of scholars, of secrets, but even that is not the end. You hesitate. Then what is? He smiles slowly. Mecca. The word falls like a stone into still water. You've heard whispers of the pilgrimage, the Hajj, but only in passing. Yet as the boat drifts under a sky full of clouds, Idrissa begins to tell you the story. Not in summary, but in motion. As though you're moving through it, not just hearing it. It begins with a single decision. Mansa Musa, ruler of Mali, descendant of kings, lord of gold, announced that he would make the pilgrimage to Mecca 5,000 kilometers across desert, river, and hostile lands. He didn't go alone, Idrissa says. He brought the sun with him. By sun, he means gold. He carried so much of it, tons. By some estimates, that entire economies bent beneath its weight. Cities along his path saw their markets collapse or boom overnight. Prices danced like flames. Money lost meaning. Generosity became overwhelming. He gave, Idrissa says, not just to impress, but to reveal. To reveal what the shape of his empire's spirit, he replies, that it could afford to give without cracking. You try to imagine it, thousands of followers, caravans stretching beyond sight, camels burdened not just with supplies, but with treasure. They moved through the Sahara with guards, scholars, slaves, griots, and even architects, because the Mansa intended to build where he stopped. He passed through Cairo, and Idrissa's voice slows. Ah, Cairo, he says, where the rivers of culture meet. But Musa's arrival was no ripple. It was a flood. The Sultan of Egypt, al-Nasir, received him with suspicion at first. Who was this African king with such boldness? Such wealth historians still argue, Idrissa says. Whether Musa insulted the Sultan by refusing to bow. But they all agree, Cairo would never forget him. Gold flooded the markets, so much so that the price of precious metals plummeted, and the ripples lasted for over a decade. Merchants rejoiced, others cursed. And yet, Idrissa continues, it wasn't just the gold. Mansa Musa met with scholars, exchanged books, built mosques. He wasn't showing off. He was planting. By the time he reached Mecca, his name was carved into the winds of the Islamic world. You imagine the sacred city, its minarets and white walls, and Musa standing among pilgrims, a king among the devout, both resplendent and humble. He walked beside men with no shoes, Idrissa says, because on the Hajj, all souls wear the same dust. When Musa returned to Mali, he did not simply ride home. He brought change. He returned with architects, scholars, maps, and manuscripts. He built mosques in Gao, Timbuktu, and Niani. He transformed cities into centers of learning. Idrissa leans closer. Do you know why this matters? You shake your head. Because the empire didn't just grow wide, it grew deep. You nod slowly, feeling the truth in that. Later. You ask, did Idrissa ever make the Hajj himself? He smiles without answering, then pulls a folded cloth from his bag. Inside is a single bead blue, shaped like a teardrop. A gift, he says, from a man I met in Medina. He walked for 7 years to get there. You hold the bead carefully, unsure if you should accept. Stories, he says, are not meant to be kept, only carried. That night, under a tapestry of stars. You think about distance not just measured in steps, but in purpose, in what you carry with you, and what you choose to leave behind. Mansa Musa didn't just return with treasure. He returned with perspective. He turned wealth into wisdom, power into promise. Historians still argue. Idrissa says the next morning, whether the Hajj made Musa great, or whether he was great before he left. But all agree after Mecca. The world knew Mali. You keep the bead, not as a souvenir, but as a reminder that even kings must travel to understand what they already hold. The journey to Timbuktu is not measured in distance, but in intention. After Idrissa's stories, every step feels like an echo, every horizon a question waiting to be answered. When you finally arrive, the city does not rise like Niani or breathe like Jenne. It waits. Timbuktu is a quiet mind under a hot sun. Mariam meets you at the edge of the city. She seems pleased but unsurprised. "You've come far," she says. "Now it's time to learn why the empire remembers." She guides you through alleys paved with sand and shadows. The buildings are box-like, sturdy, and sun-bleached, but every doorway seems older than it should be. Here, everything has been touched by thought. 3 things made this city powerful. Mariam says as you walk: gold, books, and silence. She stops at a wooden door covered in iron studs. A boy sits outside, reading aloud in Arabic. The letters roll off his tongue with confidence, though he is barely 10. "This is the Sankore Madrasa," Mariam says. "One of many. You won't find all the knowledge here, but it's a good place to begin." Inside, the light filters through carved screens, casting delicate patterns on the floor. You remove your sandals and step into a space that hums without sound. Students sit cross-legged in clusters, each with a tablet in hand, ink-stained fingers, and furrowed brows. A teacher walks among them, correcting posture, pronunciation, logic. You're introduced to one of the senior scholars, a man named Abdul. His robe is clean but plain, his voice soft but firm. "You are a guest," he says. "But here, you are also a seeker. That means you must ask wisely." He hands you a slate and a reed pen. You will not write what you already know, only what you do not. You sit beside a boy named Idris who is copying a passage from memory. You ask him what he's writing. "The properties of shadows," he says, "and how they change across seasons." You blink. "That's science." He grins. "It's observation," which is where science begins. Your days in Timbuktu take on a rhythm unlike any you've known. You rise early and join the morning recitation of texts, some religious, others philosophical. You learn the basics of astronomy by tracing stars with charcoal on goat-hide scrolls. You copy texts in both Arabic and Songhai and stumble over verses of poetry that double as equations. One afternoon, you sit in a shaded courtyard where the elder students debate. Not argue, debate. They speak of fate, of justice, of whether a river can own itself. One quotes a verse, another counters with a metaphor. The conversation weaves like a fabric, tight and taut, until someone drops a question that no one can answer. Everyone laughs. That, Abdel tells you later, is when you know you're thinking. When no one can win. You visit a scribe who stores his scrolls in clay pots to keep them safe from termites. He lets you hold one fragile as leaves, older than your grandparents' grandparents. "This one traveled," he says, "from Egypt, carried in a saddlebag with 3 copies, one for study, one for sale, one in case of bandits." You marvel at the ink, still dark, the script, still sharp. The scribe points to the seal at the bottom. This says it was checked by 3 scholars. The words were not enough, it had to be witnessed. That evening, Mariam takes you to a rooftop where the stars burn with soft fury. She holds a small astrolabe and shows you how to align it with the North Star. "Navigation is not just for ships," she says. "It's for minds, too." You remember Idrissa's bead. You hold it in your hand as the sky tilts slowly toward midnight. Historians still argue, Mariam says, whether Timbuktu was a city of faith or reason. but they all agree it kept the empire awake. One day, you help a younger student write his first formal verse. He struggles with the phrasing, the meter. You correct him gently. He smiles, then starts again. You realize you're not just learning anymore. You're remembering. At the end of your stay, Abdel calls you aside. You came here with questions, he says. But knowledge is not a well, it is a river. What matters is not how much you carry, but how clean your hands are when you scoop. He offers you a copy of a translated poem, just a few lines, hand-scribed on soft paper. Let the ink run like the Niger, and the thought be steady as stone. Let the stars mark your compass, but let silence guide you home. You carry those lines with you as you leave the madrasa for the last time. Outside, the city is unchanged. Children laugh in the alleys. Traders haggle over saffron and salt. But you feel altered. Not bigger, just more aware. The desert still waits beyond the city walls. The roads still stretch onward. But something in you has turned. You're no longer just walking the empire. You're listening to it breathe. Not every journey in Mali is planned. Some are forced by a fever. You wake in the early hours of the morning with sweat slicking your back and a strange tremor in your fingers. The dreams had been strange, bright, too loud, full of reversed rivers and whispering bones. But now your skin is cold and your throat feels thick with ash. Mariam is there before you can even call her. You've gone too fast, she says softly, pressing a cool cloth to your forehead. Too far. Too soon. You try to protest, but your words slur. She shakes her head. No griots, no scholars, no porters today, she says. Today, we walk into the old shadows. Later that morning, a donkey cart arrives. You're bundled in layers despite the heat. And Mariam sits beside you, holding a jar of cloudy water and something that smells like smoked leaves. The road is uneven, but it's not far. A grove of tall baobabs marks the village boundary. Beyond it, the land dips gently into a clearing full of whispers. The healer's hut is round, made from straw and clay, with charms dangling from the roof bones, feathers, beads, claws. Smoke coils from a slit in the roof. The air hums with something older than language. She is not a doctor, Mariam says as she helps you down. But she knows how to speak to the sickness. Inside, it's dark and warm. You lie on a woven mat, and a woman with white painted fingers kneels beside you. Her hair is bound in rings, her eyes lined with ash. She doesn't speak, not yet. Instead, she begins to touch your limbs. Fingers press against joints, trace your temples, tap your chest, then rest gently above your stomach. She listens not to your words, but to your heat, your breath, your tremble. She finally speaks, not to you, but to Mariam. Too much dust, too many stories. He's unrooted. Mariam nods, as if this diagnosis makes perfect sense. The treatment begins. First comes the tea bitter and dark, brewed with kola nuts, neem leaves, and something sharp like ginger, but more pungent. You gag. The healer tuts. That means it's working. Then, a paste of crushed charcoal and salt is smeared on your chest. A bandage of palm bark and cloth wraps around you. The final part is stranger still. She burns something in a bowl of sand. The smoke is thick and sweet, rising in lazy swirls. She waves it toward your face with a fan made of porcupine quills. Let the sickness see itself, she murmurs. You fall into a kind of half-sleep. In the dream, you're carrying a bag filled with names, and every step you take drops another name into the dust. You try to turn back, to pick them up, but they're gone, swallowed by the earth. You wake with tears in your eyes and a sour taste in your mouth. The healer nods. He remembers now. That evening, you sit outside her hut, sipping broth made from river fish, plantain, and tamarind. Your limbs ache less. Your thoughts no longer scatter like frightened birds. Miriam sits beside you, her eyes on the fire. She treated a king once, she says. He paid her in ivory and silence. You glance at her. Silence. She asked him to stop speaking for 7 days, so his voice could forget the lies it had learned. You stare into the flames. Does it always work? Not for everyone, she says. Only for those willing to hear the cure. The healer joins you. She presses a bundle into your hand, leaves wrapped in waxy cloth, tied with twine. Brew this next time your dreams turn loud, she says. You nod, unsure whether to thank her or bow. She simply smiles and disappears into the darkness of her hut. On the ride back to the city, the stars are sharp above you, and the wind smells of earth and smoke. Your body still hums not with sickness, but with the residue of something ancient. Historians still argue, Miriam says softly, whether these healers were medicine women or mystics. But they all agree when kings fell. It was the ones in huts who taught the land to stand again. You return to Niani not as a traveler, but as someone who has learned to pause. The fever becomes a story. The story becomes a layer, and the layer settles quietly into the clay of who you are. You've barely recovered from the fever when Miriam hands you a satchel and says, "Today, you'll be sung." You blink at her, unsure if you've misheard. Sung. She nods. The griot has summoned you. He said the time has come. The time for what she does not explain. Only that you are to bring nothing but your memory and your name. You walk together through the city's southern quarter, past walls painted with faded stories, past vendors who don't call out today. There's something solemn in the air, not heavy aware. You reach a courtyard surrounded by trees so old their roots have swallowed the stones beneath them. In the center sits a single man on a carved stool, staff across his lap. Eyes closed, you recognize him. The griot, the same one from your first days in Niani. Older now, somehow, though barely a moon has passed. Miriam bows. You follow her lead. The griot opens his eyes. You have listened, he says. Now you must be heard. You start to speak, unsure of what to say. He raises a hand. Not with your mouth, with your past. You frown, and he taps his staff twice. From behind the trees, 5 children emerge. They sit in a semicircle, each holding a carved drum or flute. A 6th child places a leather-bound tablet on the ground before the griot. He begins, "Your name is the first word he speaks, but what follows is not what you expected." He tells of a child born far from sand, far from salt, born not of Mali, but shaped by it. He speaks of your first step onto the red dust, your wide eyes at the market, your trembling limbs beneath salt's weight. He sings the rhythm of your breath in the library, the stagger of your silence beneath the dome of Jenne, the echo of your fever in the healer's hut. And somehow, it fits. Every moment you lived, every question you asked, every name you forgot but tried to remember, he knows. How do you whisper? But he keeps singing. He sings your hesitation. He sings your mistakes. He sings your wonder, your learning, your listening. And then he pauses. You are still becoming, he says. But you have left traces. That is enough. You sit still. The children wait. The courtyard holds its breath. Then he does something unexpected. He gestures for you to come forward. You rise, knees unsteady, and he hands you the tablet. "Speak," he says. "Say one thing the Empire must remember. Your mind races. There are too many stories, too many images. How can you choose one?" You close your eyes, you breathe, you remember, and then you say, the empire moves not by force, but by rhythm. Salt, song, story, step. The griot closes his eyes and nods. He taps the tablet with his staff. It is written. You don't see ink, you don't see words, but somehow you believe. He rises slowly, bones creaking, and walks away. The children scatter. The courtyard empties. You stand alone. Miriam is waiting outside. She sees your face. He sang you, you nod. And did you answer, I think so? You say. She smiles. Then your story has begun to carry its own legs. That evening, she hands you a folded cloth. Inside is a charm, a tiny flute carved from bone, strung on a leather cord. Keep it, she says. You may not be a griot, but someone will listen to you someday. And you'll need to remember how to begin. You hold the charm gently, tracing its smooth edge. It feels cool in your hand, but warm in your chest. Historians still argue, Miriam says, whether the griots were the voice of the empire or its ears, but they all agree when the drums stop. It is the griots who keep the heart beating. That night, you sleep beneath the stars again. No fever, no confusion, only breath. And in your dreams, you hear your own name sung not with pride or shame, but with understanding. It doesn't echo. It lives. You wake to the sound of voices not arguing, not shouting, but overlapping with rhythm and purpose, like waves in the Niger. Miriam meets you outside the courtyard, arms folded, face neutral. It's time you saw how justice breathes, she says. You follow her through Niani's west quarter, the oldest part of the city. Here, the buildings lean slightly, as if in perpetual conversation. You pass elders playing board games with black and white stones, their faces still as masks. You pass scribes talking not with pens, but with eyes. Every corner of this place seems to be listening. At the center stands a wide baobab tree, its trunk gnarled and thick, its canopy a patch of quiet shade. Around it sit rows of people, some on stools, some on mats, some cross-legged on the bare ground. There is no elevated bench, no chain, no gavel. At the front, 3 individuals sit on wooden chairs with carved backs. One wears a faded robe. One holds a leather-bound book. One carries nothing at all. They are the mediators, Miriam whispers. They do not pass judgment. They hold the conversation until it shapes itself. A boy no older than 13 stands to one side. His tunic is clean, his feet bare. His voice trembles slightly as he speaks. I gave him my goat, he says, for 2 sacks of grain. He took the goat, but the sacks were wet. They grew mold. Across from him stands a man in his 30s, lean, weathered, arms folded. I told him not to wait. The man replies, the trade was fair. The rain came too fast. The first mediator raises a hand. What time of day was the trade? Just after the first call to prayer, says the boy. Were the sacks covered? No. A pause. The second mediator turns to the crowd. What do we know of this man's grain? A woman stands. He always dries them, but his roof is cracked. A ripple of laughter. Someone calls out. Still cracked. The mediators smile, but do not laugh. The third mediator, silent until now, speaks. Let the witnesses speak not of intent, but of pattern. A griot steps forward. His robe is dusty, his voice clear. This man once sold wet grain to a widow who fell ill from the bread. But he also gave food to her son during drought, and once repaid a loan in full before it was asked. The boy nods. I do not say he is bad, only that my goat was strong, and his grain was not. The man shrugs. The goat wandered. I tied it 3 times. Someone from the crowd calls out. That goat ties itself. Laughter again. Softer. The first mediator raises both hands. The voices hush. Then begins the part Miriam had told you about, but which you never truly believed. Debate, not as battle, but as craft. The mediators invite questions not only from themselves, but from anyone in the crowd. Elders, market women, even a child. No one is mocked for speaking. No one is shouted down. Questions are asked in metaphors. Challenges are sung like riddles. Every voice is measured not by volume, but by weight. The goat and grain, says one man, are both gifts from the earth. But the earth expects you to respect its timing. The boy trusted, says another, and trust, once molded, does not rise again like dough. The language turns poetic, symbolic. You're no longer sure whether they're talking about grain or justice, but it works. And then, a final question. If the goat had remained, a woman asks, and the grain not spoiled, would the trade still be remembered? The boy looks at the man. No, he says quietly. We would have walked past each other without thought. The man nods. Then let us remember this way instead. No verdict is declared. Instead, the mediators rise. The third one says balance has found itself. The crowd murmurs approval. The boy and the man shake hands. A woman passes forward a bowl of millet porridge, and both eat from it. Miriam leans close to you. Now they are family. You stare. That's it. No punishment. She nods. Justice here is not about winning. It's about weaving. But what if someone lies? Miriam gives you a look. Then the fabric tears, and everyone feels the breeze. You sit beneath the baobab as the next case begins, this one involving a disputed inheritance between sisters. Again, the process is not about law. It is about language, memory, and community. The griot knows everyone's story. The elders remember old grudges, children whisper predictions, and vendors pass dates and honey bread between observers. It feels less like a trial and more like a ritual of restoration. Historians still argue, Miriam murmurs, whether our justice was too slow. But they all agree when Mali spoke in circles. It remembered what made it whole. You rise as the sun drops lower in the sky, the tree casting long shadows across the sand. You feel strangely full, not of certainty, but of trust. That in a world of noise, there are still places where voices are not weapons, but tools, where silence does not mean defeat, and where the answer is not always a sentence, but sometimes a shared meal. You wake to the scent of mango blossoms and the low hum of morning drums. Outside, the sky is gray with early light, and Niani is already breathing. But today feels different. Sharper, taut, like the string of a bow just before it's released. Miriam waits by the gate of her courtyard, dressed not in her usual indigo, but in deep green, the color of fertility, balance, and, as you're beginning to understand, subtle power. We're not going to the palace, she says. We're going somewhere more important. You follow her through Niani's northern quarter, past rows of low homes and clustered gardens. This area is quieter than the merchant lanes or scholar streets. But there's tension here, not the kind that leads to violence, but the kind that precedes decision. Finally, you reach a compound flanked by tall fences woven from reeds and painted clay. Inside, a large courtyard encircles a central tree. Around it, women gather. Some sit on stools, others pace. All are speaking, not loudly, but with precision. This is the house of Lady Kalama, Miriam whispers. She owns land, caravans, contracts, and knowledge. She has never held a sword. She has never knelt to the mansa. But the Empire listens when she breathes. You're led into the circle and offered a seat near the center. No one stops their discussion. You realize quickly that this is no meeting. It's a council not appointed by blood or throne, but by memory, influence, and sheer consistency. A woman with silver rings in her ears speaks with her arms folded. If we send goods north without confirming the road conditions past Tagaza, we risk losing more than salt. Another counters, but delay, and the Gao markets will choose someone else. Lady Kalama doesn't interrupt. She simply waits. Her presence holds the room like gravity. Finally, when the voices taper off, she speaks. Send 2 scouts, she says. One with trade, one with questions. We lose nothing. We gain either goods or knowledge. Everyone nods. You realize she didn't just settle the debate. She revealed its shape. She's not royalty, you whisper to Miriam. No. Miriam replies. She's an archive. You learn quickly that this house handles more than trade. It's a web of information. Contracts are discussed here, marriage terms, inheritance transitions, debts owed by generals, favors granted by griots. Kalama's reach extends into every corner of the empire, not by decree, but by detail. She gestures for you to approach after the meeting ends. You've been watching, she says, not unkindly. You nod. I didn't know that women could move nations without leaving home. She finishes. You pause. Yes. She smiles. Then let me teach you something. She brings you into a small room where shelves of bundled scrolls and tied parchments line the walls. At the center is a low table with a map etched into its surface, not of geography, but of people. Names, unions, conflicts. A network drawn in circles and lines. This, she says, is how we manage inheritance, dowries, loans, and loyalties. Not just wealth, but stability. She taps a point on the map. This merchant's wife funds 3 schools. This widow owns 5 camels. This servant girl in Jenne. Her poem was sung in Cairo last winter. You're stunned. I thought, most women didn't hold power in Mali. She turns sharply. Power is not what is given. Power is what is kept in motion. We do not rule with crowns. We rule with continuity. She walks to a scroll and unrolls it. Inside is a list of names, hundreds written in soft ink. Lineages, you ask? No. Debts paid. She gives you a charcoal stick. Choose one name, she says, and write what she gave. You hesitate, then point to a name near the top. Adama. Kalama nods. Adama gave shelter to a caravan of scholars during the famine. She asked for no coin, only that each child would recite what they had learned before sleeping. You write that down, slowly, carefully. Kalama watches. You write like someone who thinks every word must last forever. You meet her eyes. Shouldn't it? She smiles faintly. No. Words are like seeds. You plant them. You don't clutch them. That afternoon, she brings you to a different room, this one filled with baskets. Each is marked with symbols, not labels, a sun, a crescent moon, a twisted line. Inside are tokens, beads, bits of fabric. Gifts, you ask. Reminders, she says. When a woman gives something that changes a life, we do not write it down. We remember it here. She hands you a thin strip of cloth, stitched with tiny golden thread. She saved a life, Kalama says. Not with a blade, but with bread. You hold the cloth, its weight far greater than its size. Later, as you prepare to leave, Kalama stops you. You will forget most of what you've seen here, she says. But one day, someone will ask how Mali stayed whole, and you will tell them it was not the kings. It was the women who never left their posts. You nod, because now you understand. Historians still argue, Miriam says as you return home, whether women shaped the empire's destiny or simply preserved it. But they all agree no kingdom survives unless its roots are watched. You glance at the cloth in your hand. A root, a gift, a memory. You don't write it down. You carry it. The day begins not with a bell, but with a knock soft, rhythmic, unmistakably intentional. Miriam opens the door before it finishes. A boy stands in the threshold, holding a sealed letter wrapped in waxed cloth. He offers no words, only a bowed head and outstretched hands. Miriam reads it quickly, then looks to you. You've been summoned. By who, you ask? She turns the letter toward you. The wax seal is shaped like a sunburst encircled by script. The royal archivist, she says. You're to report by noon. You have just enough time to prepare before you're guided this time, not by Miriam, but by a silent palace runner through a series of shaded corridors behind the palace. These paths feel different, quieter. They don't hum with trade or teaching. They pulse with purpose. Finally, you reach a tall building made of dark stone, partially sunken into the earth, its doorway flanked by guards who carry no swords, only staves marked with ink patterns. Inside, it is cold, intentionally so. Thick walls preserve the scrolls, the ink, the memory. The Royal Archive smells of dry parchment, pine resin, and time. You are led into a chamber with a long table covered in unrolled scrolls, tablets, bound codices, and sheets of bark. Behind it stands a woman, older than anyone you've yet met in Mali. Her back is straight, her eyes sharp, her fingers stained permanently with ink. I am Aja, she says. You are the traveler, the one the griots sang. You nod, but say nothing. Something tells you this is not a place for chatter. She gestures for you to sit. Then she begins. The empire remembers in many ways, through song, through stone, through trade. But here we remember in ink. She glides her hand over a scroll. This one lists every caravan that passed through Walata in the last 10 years. She slides another forward. This is a map of droughts. Another. These are marriage records, but only between noble families who had ties to Gao. And another. This one names those who were never named in songs, but still mattered. You lean in. Why me? Because the griot called you a mirror, she replies. And mirrors belong in rooms where reflection is not optional. You blink. She continues. I want you to read, not for knowledge, for weight. Every scroll here is a stone in the foundation of this empire. You are handed a document written on animal hide, the text in Arabic. She points at a line. Read it aloud. You try, stumbling over the phrases. Good, she says. Now read it again, but mean it. You realize she's not testing your literacy. She's testing your willingness to carry the words. Later, she shows you a codex bound in bark and leather. This, she says, is not Malian. You open it. The language is unfamiliar. The script smaller, tighter. From Al-Andalus. She explains. A scholar gifted it to Mansa Musa during his pilgrimage. It contains theories about the stars, and about what lies beyond the ocean's edge. You run your fingers along the page, and suddenly the empire feels larger. Not just salt and gold, not just markets and griots, but horizons. She gestures to a wall of clay jars, each sealed with wax and stamped with symbols. What's in those, you ask? Dust, she replies, and memory. She removes one and uncorks it. Inside is not a scroll, but a handful of sand. From the battleground at Takrur, she says, where a general made peace instead of war. You look at the sand, it's ordinary, but now it carries a story. You begin to understand what this place is, a reliquary, not of relics, but of decisions. You spend the rest of the day helping to sort scrolls that are being transcribed into newer copies. You notice the methods how mistakes are marked, how dates are calculated, how names are cross-checked with oral records. Why such care, you ask? Aja looks at you. Because memory is brittle, and empires rot faster from forgetting than from invasion. Before you leave, she gives you a small box made of dark wood. Inside is a blank scroll and a vial of ink. What is this for? To write what you know, she says. Not for now. For when you are forgotten? You pause. What should I write? Not what you saw, she says. What changed you? That night, back in Miriam's home, you sit with the box in your lap. The scroll seems too clean, too expectant. You don't write yet. You're not ready. But you know you will. Soon. Because now you understand that a scroll is not just a record. It's a promise. Historians still argue, Miriam says, watching you from across the room, whether the royal archives preserved truth or power. But they all agree when Mali spoke last. It was in ink. You place the scroll beside your mat, not for safekeeping, but for planting. Because the empire didn't just walk through you, it grew through you. And now it waits to be remembered. You begin to notice the change not through words, but through absence. One morning, the market is quieter than usual. The spice vendor who always sings while weighing turmeric doesn't hum. The woman who sells millet cakes doesn't set out her second tray. Even the children who chase each other between stalls run in tighter circles, glancing over their shoulders as if they've forgotten the rules of their game. When you return to Miriam's courtyard, she's standing perfectly still, eyes fixed on the horizon. A sheet of parchment flutters in her hand. You step closer. What is it? Her voice is calm, but her fingers grip the paper tightly. Something is stirring in the east. One of the tributary chiefs has declared independence. He claims Musa has forgotten the old oaths. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the breeze. Is it war? No, she says. Not yet. But the griots have stopped singing in his name. That tells you more than any army. She turns to you. We need to visit the stables. You follow her through a side path you've never noticed before. At the edge of the city lies a small compound you assumed was abandoned. But inside, men and women move with disciplined haste, oiling saddles, checking hooves, tightening buckles. The horses are lean, alert, and armored not for parade, but for distance. These are the royal messengers, Miriam says. They carry truth faster than rumor. You watch as a young rider mounts a dark mare and sets off at full gallop. The gate swings shut behind him like a whisper being swallowed. How far will he go, you ask? All the way to Takrur, if needed, she says. A kingdom doesn't fall from rebellion. It falls when its words arrive too late. You leave the compound and walk the city's perimeter. Guards check their spears more often. Traders double knot their purses. Even the birds seem quieter. That evening, the sky turns gold too quickly. The air feels wrong, thick, expectant, like the pause before a question no one wants to answer. You eat dinner in silence. Miriam lights no lamp. You must prepare to leave, she says. You blink. Leave. This city is a balance, she says. And when one corner shakes, the center feels it. You don't respond. Not right away. You've grown into this city, into its dust, its rhythm, its breath. The idea of leaving feels like trying to tear bark from skin. She sees it in your face. "Don't worry," she says gently. "You're not running. You're carrying." You sit with that for a long time. The next morning, Miriam takes you to the House of Records, another building you'd never noticed, though you must have passed it a dozen times. Inside, scribes are busy at work. Scrolls are packed. Documents are sealed. We don't know what will happen next. One of them tells you. So we prepare for every ending. They hand you a small bundle, 2 scrolls, a wax seal, a carved token with the symbol of Sankore. "This is your burden now," the scribe says, "and your inheritance. You carry it with reverence." Later, Miriam brings you to the main well, where the oldest of the water drawers is singing under her breath. She's singing the Litany of Storms. Miriam whispers. It hasn't been sung in years. Not since the last drought. Not since a city to the south disappeared under sand. You ask what it means? She's not warning the city. Miriam replies. She's reminding it how to remember. That night, you don't sleep. You sit under the stars, the scrolls beside you, the silence pressing against your ribs. You think about Musa, his gold, his journey, his libraries. You think about Kalama, about Lady Adama, about the boy with the goat, the porter with salt burns, the teacher who showed you to trace stars. You think about how fragile it all seems, how strong it has proven to be, and how easily it could vanish. Historians still argue, Miriam says softly from the doorway, whether Mali ended in conquest or confusion. But they all agree it whispered first. You rise. You do not pack quickly. You pack deliberately. Not as a guest, but as someone who has something to carry. You leave Niani as the sky breaks into copper and indigo. The streets are quiet, not abandoned, just waiting. Waiting for news, for peace, for memory to decide how loud it wants to speak. You walk toward the edge of the empire with a satchel of scrolls and a bead around your neck. And in your chest, a rhythm soft, steady, shaped by every footstep you've taken. Not toward the end of something, but toward the part where you begin to write it down. You walk until the city fades behind you, not suddenly, but slowly, like a lantern dimming at dawn. Niani does not disappear. It recedes, settling into your memory with the weight of stone and the rhythm of breath. The road ahead is dry, flat, shimmering in the heat, but you walk as if guided not by map or compass, but by continuity. The scrolls are tucked tightly in your satchel. You haven't read them yet. You don't dare not until you're somewhere safer, somewhere quieter. For now, they press against your hip like a pulse. The first village you reach offers water and wary glances. A group of children chase a lizard between sun-baked walls. A woman sells fried yam with a frown too practiced to be sincere. A traveling smith adjusts the strap of his hammer and says, "You've come from the east, from Niani." You nod. He studies your face. Is it true then that the griots have gone silent? You pause. Then you say what Miriam once told you. The griots aren't silent. They're listening. The smith blinks, then he nods. Good, because the land is speaking. You don't stay long. You keep walking. The next village is smaller, barely more than a clearing, with 3 huts and 1 communal fire. You sleep near the edge, wrapped in your robe, dreaming of wells that whisper and flames that ask you questions. A trader passing through offers you a seat beside her donkey the next morning. Her name is Lika, and she trades in dye bright blue from indigo, deeper purple from beetles crushed in careful mortar. Color is like speech, she says. Too much. And people think you're hiding something. Too little. And they forget you're alive? She's headed west. toward a town that didn't exist on any of the maps you saw in the archives. But it has markets, she explains, and markets always mean memory. She doesn't ask what's in your satchel, but she does ask where your thoughts are going, to a city that no longer feels safe. You reply. She nods. That makes you like everyone else. You part ways at a crossroads where the trees lean south and the wind carries the scent of faraway fire. You travel alone again, and slowly. Each step draws you deeper into the empire's edges. These are places you never saw in ink or parchment. Here, the griots don't visit often. Here, people don't speak Musa's name with reverence, but with calculation. You spend a night in a town that was once prosperous, now hushed, wary. There are stories of envoys intercepted, of supply routes rerouted, of kings in the north who no longer send gifts. In the center of that town is a cracked stone pillar covered in old inscriptions. You kneel beside it and trace a line with your finger. The words are nearly erased. You recognize only one symbol, a river. Beside it, someone has scratched something newer. A warning, not in ink, not in charcoal, but in claw marks. You leave early the next morning, moving before the town wakes. The road tilts upward, hills roll in the distance. The wind changes, it smells of ash and old wheat. At the summit of one hill, you rest beneath a tree bent sideways by storms. Its roots are exposed, but still gripping the soil. From this height, you can see a caravan moving below, slow and small. Smoke curls from a distant cook fire. You take out the scrolls for the first time. The wax peels away cleanly. The parchment unrolls without resistance. The ink is dark, smooth, precise. The first scroll is a list, a simple one. But its simplicity is deceptive. It names those who kept the roads clean of bandits, those who buried the sick during the fever years, those who rebuilt the well near Jaka after it collapsed, those who died doing these things. Each name is followed by no titles, no lineage, just what they did. The second scroll is a story, not of a king, not of a war, but of a boy who convinced his village to store grain during the flood year, because he remembered something his grandmother once said about frogs chirping early. That story saved 50 lives. His name was Ba. You roll the scrolls gently and place them back into your satchel. You do not cry, but something stirs, a kind of urgency. You press forward. The terrain becomes rockier. You begin to meet travelers moving toward the center of the empire, again returning to Niani, to Timbuktu, to places now tense with questions. They ask where you're going. You say, forward. One man replies, no one walks forward now, only sideways. And you think maybe that's what memory does. It doesn't march, it loops. At a well near a crossroad tree, you find a woman telling stories to children. She's not a griot. Her hair is too wild, her voice too sharp. But the children listen. She notices you, nods once and says, you look like someone who forgot something important. You nod, I'm trying to remember it. She smiles. Then you're doing better than most. That night, you camp near a wide river you don't recognize. The stars are clean above you. The scrolls rest beneath your head like a pillow of meaning. You think of Mariam, of Idrissa, of Kalama, of Aja, the archivist. You think of the griot who sang your name, and you wonder, will someone sing it again? You don't know, but you keep walking. Historians still argue. You whisper into the dark, whether Mali was a place or a pattern. But they all agree it left footprints even where no map dared to draw. You sleep with one hand on the scrolls, and your next step already forming in your bones. You arrive at dusk. The town is called Diaga. though no one says it aloud anymore. The signpost marking its entrance is missing half its letters, and the others are scorched as if someone tried to erase the name, but changed their mind halfway through. The marketplace is still intact rows of mud brick stalls, a central fountain filled with dust, but it hums with silence. Not the expectant quiet of dawn, but the thick kind. The kind that settles after things are left unsaid for too long. You walk the perimeter. You count the stalls. 52. You note the layout: salt toward the west, cloth toward the east, spices in the shaded middle. Someone once thought carefully about how this market should breathe. Now it wheezes. In the far corner, a woman sits beside a basket of figs. They're old, shriveling. She doesn't call out to you, just watches. You approach and greet her. She nods. "Not much business today," you say. "There hasn't been much in years." She replies, voice dry. "But it's still market day, so I still come." You glance around. Does anyone else only those too stubborn to stop? You sit beside her. She offers a fig without asking for coin. You take it, chew slowly. It tastes like patience. She looks at your satchel. You're carrying something important. You nod. She squints, scrolls. Yes. She turns back to the road. "This town used to send our scribes to Timbuktu. Now, they forget how to sign their names." You watch as a gust of wind pushes a bit of broken pottery across the square. "What happened?" you ask. She shrugs. The river changed course. The chief died without a son. The traders found a shorter route. The griots stopped coming. Take your pick. You think about that, about how easy it is to unravel something when you stop naming it. You reach into your satchel and pull out the second scroll, the story of Ba, the boy who remembered what his grandmother said about frogs. You read it aloud. She listens without interrupting. When you finish, she leans back. "That happened here." You look up. "What Ba?" she says. "He was from Diaga. I remember him. Used to run between the wells with a slingshot and too many questions." She shakes her head. "So someone remembered. Someone wrote him down." You nod. She wipes her eyes with the edge of her scarf. "Historians came through once," she says. "They asked for maps. We had none. They asked for ledgers. Gone. They asked who our leader was. No one knew what to say. And so," she adds, "they said we weren't a real town." You say nothing. You look at the scroll again. The name etched in ink. "The boy made real." She says, "Can I borrow that story?" You nod and hand her the scroll. She doesn't unroll it again. She just holds it in her lap. That night, you sleep in the back of an old tannery. The smell is faint but stubborn. You dream of towns disappearing beneath sand, of names floating like feathers, of ink that vanishes if you look away too long. In the morning, you find the woman again. She has set up 2 baskets now, one filled with her figs, one with slips of paper. You ask what they are. "Memories," she says. "I asked the children to write down things they remembered about this town. The names of old cats, recipes, games, even insults. You pick one at random. It reads, 'The mango tree near the river used to grow crooked until Uncle Kalu tied it straight with rope.' You smile." She shrugs. If no one writes them, they disappear. You help her for a while reading the papers aloud to passers-by. At first, people scoff. Then they linger. Then they nod. Then they contribute. A boy brings a scrap with just one word, Mina. His sister's name. Gone 3 years now. Another writes, "We used to ring a bell when the sun touched the edge of the well. By noon, the basket is full." Someone lights a small fire in the center of the square. Someone brings drums. No one says we're a town again. But no one needs to. You stay one more night. And when you leave, the woman gives back your scroll. But she slips something else into your satchel, a copy of the memory scraps, bundled in twine. Not for historians, she says. For someone like you. You walk west. The road is flatter now, less forgiving. The sun cuts sharper. The wind talks more. You pass a traveler with a flute tucked behind his ear. You nod. He nods. Nothing more. You pass a skeleton of a building where someone etched a line above the doorway. If you forget, return. If you remember, share. You stop and read it twice. Then you write it down. That night, you camp alone. The scrolls are beside you. The Diaga bundle rests on your chest. You think about Ba. You think about Mina. You think about what it takes to keep a place real. Historians still argue. You murmur. Whether places vanish from maps or from minds. But they all agree the market only dies when the stories stop. You drift to sleep with your hand resting lightly on the twine. And in the morning you write a name. Just one. So it won't be lost again. The road bends westward, then veers sharply south. You follow it without hesitation now, led not by maps, but by memory. Your feet know the rhythm. Your breath matches the dust. Each step carries more than your body. It carries scrolls, stories, names. You have become, in some quiet, accidental way, a moving archive. You're weeks from Niani now, deep in the edgelands where the Empire's shape starts to blur. Few here speak of Musa, fewer still of the griots. But when you arrive at the outskirts of a city called Wara, something shifts. It isn't grand. The walls aren't tall. The gates don't shine. But the sound, that's what you notice first. The hum of voices, not hurried, not hushed, measured, like a room filled with people waiting their turn to speak. You step inside and feel it instantly. This is a city that listens. The buildings are low and painted with symbols, waves, eyes, circles, spirals. Even the stones underfoot are etched with markings. Not writing, exactly. More like reminders. A boy walks past, tapping a rhythm on a hollowed gourd. A woman tells her daughter a proverb without looking up from her loom. A dog barks twice, then stops, as if remembering something. You find a shaded plaza near the center where elders sit in silence, surrounding a large drum covered by woven cloth. You wait. You've learned not to interrupt. Eventually, one of them looks at you. You're carrying something, he says. You nod. From Niani you nod again. He gestures to a flat stone beside him. Sit, and tell us what your feet have learned. You unroll the scroll about Ba. You tell them the story not as a performance, not as a lesson, just as it is. When you finish, the man smiles. We knew that boy. His uncle brought him here once during the flood season. He chased our goats and sang to our wells. You hand him the scroll. He doesn't take it. We don't keep paper here, he says. We keep retellings. Another elder leans forward. Let us tell it now. And they do. Not word for word, but true. One adds the boy's habit of chewing sugarcane when nervous. Another remembers his laugh. A third adds a detail you never knew, that Ba once helped save a bird trapped in a basket net. You watch the story breathe. You understand, again, that to carry something is not always to hold it. Sometimes, it is to release it in the right place. They offer you a place to stay, a room above a smithy that smells of iron and cola nut. You accept. For 3 days, you rest. You copy parts of your scrolls into fresh palm leaf sheets. You trade stories with the young. You listen to the sound of Wara absorbing what it hears. On the fourth morning, a girl wakes you before dawn. "There's someone you need to meet," she says. She leads you to a narrow house near the city's edge. Inside, it's dark, cool, lined with hanging shells that clink softly in the wind. At the back, a woman waits. She wears a robe of faded white and walks with a limp, but her eyes are sharp. "I heard you told Ba's story," she says. You nod. She pulls a bundle from beneath her seat and unwraps it slowly. Inside a torn piece of cloth, a wooden toy bird, a stone shaped like a heart. These were his. She says, "You freeze. You're his mother." She nods. "I never knew he had family still. Most don't. They forget the mothers, but I remember everything." You sit in silence. Then, carefully, you hand her a copy of the story. Not the original scroll, but your palm leaf version. She traces the lines with her finger. When she reaches the end, she says, "This isn't just Ba's story. It's mine, too." You nod. "Then maybe you should tell it." She looks up. "I will, starting today." That afternoon, the plaza fills. She tells the story of her son not as a fable, but as truth. Her voice trembles, but it holds. And when she finishes, she adds one more line, and when the frogs sing early, we listen. The people of Wara nod. They do not applaud. They remember. You leave Wara the next day. At the gate, a child gives you a gift, a smooth piece of wood etched with Ba's name and the symbol of a frog. "So you don't forget who reminded us," the child says. You press the token to your heart. The road awaits. You pass hills where the wind sounds like whispers. You pass trees carved with messages from travelers who came before you. Remember Adama. The archive breathes. You are the story now. You don't stop walking. You don't feel tired. You feel filled. Historians still argue. You whisper to the wind. Whether an empire ends when its kings fall, or when its people stop listening. But they all agree some cities don't forget. They echo. Wara is behind you now, but you carry it forward. One name at a time. You are halfway up a dry ridge when the sky shifts. It begins not with thunder, but with smell, a sudden change in the air, wet stone, cracked earth waking up, something green and buried rising to greet the world again. The clouds above are low and purple, swollen with promise. Then finally it falls. Rain. It hits the ground with rhythm, not a storm, but a song. The dust lifts into steam. The road vanishes beneath puddles that weren't there a breath ago. You pull your cloak tighter, but you're soaked within minutes. You don't mind. You haven't seen rain since Niani. You find shelter beneath a wide, twisted acacia tree, its branches low and its bark slick. From here, you watch the land change. Tiny rivers carve sudden paths through the dirt. Dried-up roots reach upward like fingers. Even the birds seem caught by surprise. A girl approaches through the rain. She carries a calabash on her head and walks with the ease of someone born between storms. She doesn't speak right away, just joins you under the tree and watches the same sky. Eventually, she says, they say this kind of rain is called backward memory. You glance at her. Why? Because it makes the land remember who it was, even if the people have forgotten. She pours water from her calabash into a shallow hole between roots. My grandmother used to do this. She adds, said it helped the trees remember their thirst. You nod. That makes sense to you now. After the rain slows, she leads you to her village, no walls, just clusters of round huts ringed by gardens and silence. The people don't seem surprised to see you. They make space, offer broth, dry your satchel by the fire. You share one story, just one. The story of Mina, the name on a child's scrap from Diaga. A mother in the village stops what she's doing. I knew a Mina once, she says. She had a birthmark on her cheek like a comma, laughed with her whole body. You look at her, she was from here. The woman nods. She left during the famine, went west, toward the river. We never heard from her again. You hand the woman a copy of the Diaga scraps. Her hands shake as she reads them. When she reaches Mina's name, she presses the page to her chest. She wasn't lost. She says softly, she was carried. That night, the villagers light no lamps. They sit outside and speak one name each into the dark. One name to keep, one name to lift. You write them down. In the morning, a man with a scar above his eye pulls you aside. I know what you're doing, he says. You're keeping what the rain forgets. You smile, or what it helps us remember. He hands you a piece of folded bark. There's a place 2 days south, he says, called Kumbra. The people there have stories, but no way to hold them. Go there. You do. The road is dry again by midday, the heat rising in silver waves. You pass trees dripping with leftover rain, their leaves bright, almost smug. You hum a song from Wara without realizing it. 2 days later, you arrive in Kumbara. There's no wall, no gate, just people carving names into flat stones and placing them under trees. A woman explains. This is our archive. The wind reads it for us. You tell her about scrolls, about griots, about Ba and Adama and the frog that warned of the rains. She listens. Her eyes widen. She leads you to a circle of stones where children sit, copying symbols onto clay tiles. We've been trying to remember how to remember, she says. But no one ever taught us the old ways. You kneel beside a boy writing the word for tree. He asks how to spell promise. You show him. You let him write it himself. By dusk, they bring you to a man they call the Wall, an elder who remembers everything but can no longer speak. He blinks twice to say yes, once to say no. You sit beside him. You begin reading your scrolls aloud. He closes his eyes and smiles. It takes 3 days to copy your scrolls onto bark. You teach them how to dry it, wrap it, store it. You don't stay longer than you should. When you leave, they press a wrapped bundle into your hands. Inside 10 new stories. Their stories. One of a woman who stopped a flood by breaking a dam with her bare hands. One of a man who fed 100 with just 2 yams and a song. All true, or true enough to carry. Historians still argue. You whisper, walking into the wind, whether rain makes things grow or simply reminds them how to begin again. You think of the girl and her calabash. You think of Mina's mother. You think of each name spoken in the dark, and then you whisper your own, not to be remembered. But to prove that you still are, you cross into the next valley as the first light of morning slides over the horizon like a hand smoothing wrinkled cloth. The sky is the color of unrolled parchment. The road ahead looks like ink drying slowly under your feet. The satchel is heavier now, not just with scrolls, but with testimony. You carry names, smells, stories, dried leaves, tokens carved by children, songs half remembered from places the maps have forgotten. And yet, you walk easier. You arrive at a village called Zandugu, barely a dot on the old archive maps. But as you step into the town square, you hear laughter, not the hollow kind that covers silence. The real kind. Children dash through the dust chasing a hoop made of twisted vine. Women arrange mangoes into pyramids. A boy plays a balafon while balancing a calabash on his head, daring someone to challenge him. You're met by a man in a sky-colored robe who introduces himself as Ko. He eyes your satchel. "You're not the first," he says. You blink. "What do you mean we've had others? Not with scrolls, but with questions, with stories, with intentions." He gestures for you to follow. At the edge of the village stands a structure of woven reeds, thick clay and polished wood. It's low, round, windowless. The door is carved with a single symbol, a mouth, open and radiating lines. "This is the house that listens," Ko says. Inside, it's quiet, not empty quiet. Scrolls line the walls. Some are rolled, others hang like tapestries. Symbols are etched into floor tiles. Ink pots sit in the corners like sleeping animals. There are no guards, no locks, just trust. Ko explains, anyone may come here, to read, to write, to record. Not because they're chosen, but because they care enough to do it right. He turns to you. Would you like to leave something behind? You sit at one of the low tables. You open your satchel, and you begin. You do not write one grand story. You do not attempt to summarize the empire. You write moments, the porter who touched salt like it was sacred, the griot who remembered your breath, the healer who let silence speak, the raindrop that brought back Ba's name, the market that returned for one day just long enough to matter. You write them not in order, not in perfection, but in presence. Each one becomes its own constellation, small, but visible. When you finish, Ko places a stone on top of your work. That means someone has read it, he explains, even if they haven't yet. You leave the scroll with him, but you carry the others forward. Because now, your role is clear. You are not a witness. You are not a messenger. You are the rhythm between them. Before you leave Zandugu, the children ask you for a story. They don't request one about kings or war. Tell us one about forgetting. One girl says, but make it funny. You think. Then you tell them the story of the salt porter who once left a block behind, only to realize it halfway across the desert and returned, only to find a goat sleeping on it like a throne. They laugh until they cry. You realize this is how an empire survives, not through force, but through repetition. You pass through more villages. Some welcome you with firelight, others with caution. In each, you offer a story. You write a name, you listen. Eventually, you begin to see faces again. Familiar ones, a trader from your first days in Nyani, now walking a new route. A child from Wara, grown taller, carrying her own scroll. Even Mariam, yes, Mariam in a border town, her robes dusty, her gaze unchanged. She smiles. I heard you were still walking. I thought you stayed behind. She shakes her head. I only paused. Someone had to teach the silence how to speak again. You sit together on the roof of a low inn. She pulls something from her satchel. A small clay tablet, broken, wrapped in cloth. She hands it to you. It's from the archive. Your name was written, she says, on the edge of one scroll. Not for glory, just in the margin. You trace the mark with your thumb. Then I've done enough. You whisper, no, she says. You've started enough. The wind carries the scent of wood smoke and tamarind. Below, in the square, someone plays a melody you once heard beneath a baobab tree. And in the morning, when you rise, you do not carry the scrolls as a burden. You carry them as breath. Historians still argue, Mariam says softly as you part again, whether Mali ended with conquest or conversation, but they all agree those who carried stories kept the embers warm. You walk forward, not alone, never alone again, because the empire is no longer just a place. It is a pulse, and you are still walking in its rhythm. You walk slower now. Not because you're tired, but because the road no longer rushes you. You've seen the markets breathe, the scrolls whisper, the salt sing, and the silence teach. You've carried names that would have vanished. You've shared stories that returned places to life. You've walked where kings once ruled, where griots still remember, where mothers bury the past in bark, and boys carve it back into wood. And you've learned the empire was never just gold. It was rhythm. It was memory and motion. The ink may fade, the walls may crumble, but so long as someone remembers, it breathes. You rest beneath an acacia tree one last time, your satchel beside you, full but no longer heavy. Children pass, singing an old song with new words. Someone in the distance reads aloud your story, not your name, but the echo of what you left. The empire does not end. It continues in footprints, in questions, in the pause between two verses. So now, let your breath slow. Let your body soften. Let the fire die gently to ash. The wind will carry what matters, and the story, your story, will carry on in others. You've walked far enough for today. Close your eyes. The empire is safe. The night remembers you.